Hello, my name's Carl and welcome to the Straw Bite Workshop. In this video we're going to be taking a look at a project that put a door into the side of the workshop. It's a really interesting build, the sort of thing that you might be tempted to tackle yourself, and if you want to know how I did it and how much it cost, then please stay with me until the end of the video. That's all coming up. Okay, so putting the door into the side of the workshop has been on the project list ever since we moved into the house. The plan was to show step by step how I built the frame, refurbished a reclaimed door and cut the opening and installed the door into the wall of my workshop. However, that's not what happened. In the end, February turned out to be one of the wettest Februaries on record, and I had to abandon most of the filming in order for me and my builder to get the door in between downpours and to get the project done on time. So this is more of a story of my workshop door, and let's go and take a look. So being able to enter the workshop from the garden has made a huge difference. I no longer have to enter the workshop through the up and over garage door, and with that door really only now being used to move big items on wheels in and out of the workshop, and only occasionally, I can now use the space in front of that large door for storage. Now many of you will remember last summer me installing the insulation into the walls and to the roof. That project was a huge success, but I've needed to wait until now to complete all of the insulation work around the door and above the up and over garage door. So this project has been 2 months in the making, including all of the work that I've done subsequently to get the surround of the door complete, a few other odd jobs in the workshop and so on. And really the best way to find out what's happening in the workshop on a day-to-day basis is to follow me on Instagram, and I'll leave a link to my Instagram page in the description below. Now the story of this door starts before we even moved into the house. The builder had half built the garage when we first came to see the house, and so at that point it wasn't possible for them to put the personnel door in. It resulted in me planning well in ahead of moving in to acquire a door and to think about where the door was going to go. The door itself is a reclaimed door I got from a local reclamation yard. I'll leave a link to them in the description below. The door is quite large, almost 1 metre wide, comes in 2 leaves and is 55mm thick, which resulted in me not being able to find a suitable off-the-shelf frame for the door. So faced with the choice of paying a joinery company to do the work or doing it myself, I thought I would use the fact that I had a lot of oak in the workshop to have a crack at the project myself. So I chose to use oak partly because it was what I had in stock. It's also a common building material here in rural Northamptonshire, and I wanted the resulting door in the side of my garage to look pleasing from the garden. The oak that I had was of various lengths and thicknesses. I needed to roughly cut all of the pieces to rough dimensions in order to make them manageable for the next step really, which was to laminate them together to get the correct thickness for the component blanks. Okay, so I've got all of the timber machined up now, and everything's overlong, and I'll cut to the final dimensions a bit further along in the process. The next step really is to focus on machining the profiles into the two uprights of the door. And I've got a diagram here that explains a little bit more about what I'll be doing. There are four basic components of the frame: a header, which is a sort of rectangular piece of wood, a shaped piece at the bottom that will have a bevel along the outside edge, and then these two uprights that will have a profile machined into it. The profile looks a bit like this. Nominally, the thickness of the timber is half the width, and I've chosen 100mm roughly and 50mm thick. In reality, because of the planing and dimensioning of the timber, they're a little bit short of that. But fundamentally, to fit a 55mm door into this frame, I need to cut a rebate which is 57mm wide, that's 55 plus 2mm clearance, and 20mm deep. I'm going to do it on the table saw. That allows me to overcut by 3mm in either of these two cuts, and then that leaves me with a groove into which I can fit the weatherproofing strip at a later date. Using the table saw to complete some of these milling operations on these long upright blanks really was pushing the saw to its absolute limit. So with the profile machined now into the sides of the door frame, I need to think about how to connect the uprights to the piece at the bottom and the header at the top. And I've got a couple of diagrams that will illustrate that. So the traditional way of assembling a door frame is to use a haunch tenon that goes into a mortice cut into both the header and the door sill. This is a relatively simple joint to make. However, I have a domino machine, so I'm replacing all of that with something which is ultimately going to be much simpler to cut and actually install into the door itself. There are many ways in which you can put a bevel onto a large piece of wood. There's a technique that you can use on the planer thicknesser. I chose to use my Workzone battery hand planer. It's a very capable machine and had no trouble in putting a 5-degree bevel onto the leading edge of this door sill. All of the wood has been machined and assembled. You'll see here a picture of the completed door inside the frame. What I've done is I've used packing wedges to put the door into the frame, glued the door up, used clamps to hold the joints together, and then used the packing wedges with the door inserted into the frame to hold everything square. And this was the most straightforward way I could think of assembling the door and allowing it all to dry. You'll see there are a couple of horns on the top section. They'll be trimmed flush in order for the door to be installed into what will be a rectangular opening. So the door installation actually took place over the weekend. Firstly, measurements are taken, and in advance of my builder arriving, I'd marked out where I wanted the door to go on the side of the garage. Once we got started, initially a few bricks are removed at the top of the opening, which is where the acro props and strong buoys are installed. That supports the wall above and the wall plate, which again is then supporting the roof. On the outside, 2 battens are fixed vertically to the wall, and these act as a straight edge for the angle grinder. So you might be asking yourself why I chose to involve a builder in a project which, to be honest, I was probably very capable of being able to complete myself. Well, there were a number of factors. Firstly, we had a builder on site already doing a landscaping project which included the area immediately outside where I wanted the garage door to go. The second factor is that I would have had to have hired the acro props and strong boys needed to support the wall, and there was at least a couple of £100 worth of expense there. And also I need to bear in mind that I essentially run a workshop on my own, and putting a door in is at least a 2-person job. Once all of the cuts have been made, the bricks are then removed to form the opening. The opening is fixed to the wall using pre-drilled holes and then inserting framing screws. When I made the frame, the long pieces I used were actually a little bowed, and a top tip is to ensure that when you machine the doors, they bow inwards. That way, when you put the framing screws in, you can straighten the door frames out. And then a lintel is installed above to support the wall. So the acro props will be left in place overnight, supporting the wall as the mortar goes off. Following day, they're removed and the holes then filled with more mortar. So having installed the door a few weeks ago, I was really excited to show off the door. I did an exclusive video for my patrons, and here's a quick clip from that video. I've just installed my garage door, and this is the new way into the workshop. So here we go. So a little bit more work in progress. One of the things that was missed off the workshop installation build was above the garage door, and let's get the orientation right, where the door was going to go. So really what I've done is I've battened out, like I did before, 40mm of PIR insulation into the onto the battens, and then 12mm MDF on top. And about the only thing that I'm probably not going to be able to get done today is going to be the door lining and also the painting of the MDF, so that we've got this nice grey colour. There's a little bit more work to do. The door needs to be fully redecorated, and whilst we've had some fine weather in April, that's a job that I'm going to leave to a little bit later in the year. I want to do both inside and out. The other thing to note is that I've chosen hinges which actually turned out to be a little bit on the small side. There's a little bit of sagging of the door in the frame, which I'm not happy with. So in the next few weeks I'll be taking the door back out and putting in larger hinges, possibly 3 hinges per leaf, in order to really properly support the door when the door is open. So there you go, that's the story of my new workshop door. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and any questions that you have, please leave in the comments below. I promised you I'd explain how much this project cost, and in order to do that, we'll break that down into the cost of the door and the frame, fittings and locks and so on, and also the building costs. So the door itself was £150 from a reclamation yard. I think that's incredibly good value for something quite as solid as this particular door. The door frame, in terms of materials, most of it I had on hand, but I estimate around about £150 worth of oak boards were used to make the frame. In terms of fixtures and fittings, around about £100 there. It includes the locks, both inside and out, and good quality strong bolts. And in terms of building costs, it was around about £500, which I think was more than worth it, given the fact that I didn't actually then have to hire any equipment myself, strong boys and acro props to put the door in. So this is the new entrance, and I'm really happy, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And for now, from the workshop, cheerio.